Let's talk about, I'm going to give you another numbers here. Interracial marriage. I found this to be fascinating. In 1967, and this just blew my mind away, there were still laws against interracial marriage in the South, with just 4% of Americans approving of interracial marriage.
4? Did you say
4%,
4?
4% in 1967. Today, that has grown to 74%.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was just an amazing stat.
Well, you have to understand that perhaps part of the reason there's so much disparity there is that it used to be against the law to be married interracially, right? We had these things called miscegenation laws where you could actually be convicted of a crime if you were a person of a different race, particularly if you were, it was mostly if you were an African American married to a white person. And so it wasn't until the Supreme Court's decision in Loving versus Virginia that law got struck down. And I think that's why there was such a dichotomy in terms of the differences between then and actually now.
Now you work obviously in the civil rights movement and you've studied it, but could you imagine saying that to a child today?
Yeah.
Imagine sitting down with a 10-year-old and saying that it used to be against the law.
Yeah.
That'd be a great conversation to have.
I think your numbers though show the movement in the country where the social psychological movement is going. Those numbers reflect it.
Yes. Absolutely.
And Dr. Tibbs, I want to ask you, obviously President Obama has talked about race, but he very seldom does address it. Do you think that he's missing a golden opportunity as the first African-American president to address the nation and open the dialogue about race relations?
I think he's in a very hard place, to be honest. I mean, he is the leader of a nation. He is not a community organizer anymore. He doesn't get to just have one voice. But at the same time, he can't not pay attention or ignore the fact that he's an African-American man, because it's sort of constantly in the media talked about African-American president, and perhaps because it is a very historic moment for us. So I think that when it's opportune for him to talk about race, I think he does it in a very good way. I think it's very specific, it's very targeted, and if you really pay attention to what he says, it's very strong in terms of its statement. To do otherwise, I think then he would be criticized for being divisive, being a race baiter, playing the race card, right? All that racialized language that would sort of strike at the heart of what he's trying to do. And you've got to remember, President Obama is one of inclusivity as well. He wants one great nation. He doesn't want to step in the office and say, wow, look, now brother made it. I'm going to look out for all the black people, right? That's not the way that he is. That's not the way that he thought. That's not the platform that he ran on. He ran on the platform of hope. Hope for a great nation, but a one America.
So where do we go from here? We're obviously 50 years from the speech, but 2013, still a lot of improvements to be made. Where do we start, Dee Dee?
Well, I have to say that, again, policy-wise, I don't usually agree with President Obama, but I really love him as a president in this way because I do think he's done such a wonderful job, bringing the country together. And it reminds me of Dr. King in a way. I mean, as far as being inspirational and being warm, and I just really, really like that about President Obama. So I think we really should look at the glass half full in a lot of ways, because think about the terrible things that were going on 50 years ago, and now we have a black president, and we have, I think, a lot of things to celebrate, certainly. So I don't know. I like to look at it as like a very, very good day, other than those GOP people not showing up. Missed opportunity, not happy with that.
Combating joblessness and reducing gun violence in the African-American communities. That was something that President Obama said are some of the top issues. Agree?
Yes, definitely agree. And if I could just go back, I think Dee Dee's absolutely right. I mean, certainly those are once again issues that are continuing to plague the African American community, but not just because they are African American. It's because those types of issues affect people who are impoverished, right? So it is really more so about poverty in some ways than it is about race very specifically. And if you remember what Martin Luther King came to speak about in the I Have a Dream speech, it was racial equality and economic equality. And I think that that's particularly what President Obama is trying to do. One of the things that I really thought was very interesting in the speech to me, and I would encourage others to go back and listen to it, is to notice how much he got into a Southern swang with a sort of a preacher style delivery. It almost sounded like he wanted to sound like Martin Luther King Jr., which he did in some ways, but of course we know no one could ever accomplish that.
Now, I'm going to ask you a tough question this is probably going to be my toughest question now for all of you. I have a dream, and you can finish the sentence.
Ask them first.
Okay.
Wow, that's a really good question. I think I have a dream that one day all the sadness, all the poverty, all the world destruction, all the hurt and the pain can go away, and that it can be done in a way that builds a new world where people are happy and peaceful and loving. That would be my dream.
That's wonderfully said.
Thank you.
Dr. Bart?
I have a dream that this progressive movement that I mentioned before continues, and it actually grows and develops and becomes even more dynamic. So we have a country that is for everybody, and that freedom will actually work for everyone. And I think that's what we really need to take a look at, and that's what I see, actually.
I have a dream that we'd be colorblind, that it doesn't matter, and you know, and everything is equal and the same. And I think we're heading that way, and that's good. I mean, obviously we still have things to work with, but those of us who get it, we just love each other, and it's all good. Doesn't matter.
Well, I do agree with you, Dr. Bart, on the fact that the younger generation, and I might even go a little bit older in age. I think that most people that were exposed to it that are 55 and under even
Sure.
Are more open to even gay marriage, gay rights, and all that. So I think that you're seeing a much greater progression as time has gone on.
And I think that there's this under the surface racism with some older folks. They say they're not racist, they're not biased, but they really are.
I think they are too. Like the
really
Paula
are.
Dean thing, that infuriated me.
wow.
Whenever she said,
That
"Oh, I'm
was
sorry, it's
awful.
just cultural," and I'm like, "Are you
Kidding
kidding me?
me.
You're a racist. That's pathetic."
Yeah.
And you know, I have no tolerance for that. And I think a lot of people are like, "We don't even get how anybody would ever think that."
Well, I will leave with one scary, because we left on such a nice note about I have a dream, but organizations like the Ku Klux Klan are growing. And that is a very frightening thing to me, to realize that that is actually still part of our culture.
You know, I always say that we all have different sides to our personality. America's always going to have a side that's going to be negative. There's always going to be certain fringe people. That's okay. As long as most of us are moving forward, we'll be okay.
And I think we need to be thankful for organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center and the work of Morris Dees, because he's really, through using the law, struck at the heart of those types of organizations and has just sort of consistently bankrupt them in ways that they don't have some of the economic resources that they once had. So to have hate, but to not have a way to act it out, just really leaves you to sort of sit over by yourself in the corner.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tibbs. It's always good to see you.
Thank you.
You're going to stick around for our next segment, Dr. Bart and Dee Dee. And don't go away, everyone. The next question we have for you is Big Brother watching you. If you're one of the 1 billion Facebook users, it's quite possible. When we come back after the break, we will talk about why Facebook is sharing information with governments from around the world.